Hello, and welcome to this short video where we'll explore the definitions and terminology used in my program, Foresight for a Reinvented Future. We're going to be looking at foresight, at megatrends, drivers, trends, horizon scanning, driving forces, and scenarios. So what is foresight? Well, foresight is a range of tools and approaches that we use to help us consider the future. It's a critical thinking process, a creative process that should provide compelling content that helps colleagues across the organization understand the value of looking ahead. It should consider a range of different factors and developments, social, technological, economic, environmental, political, that could shape the emerging future. What's really important is to ensure that the information we develop through a foresight process is clearly arranged so it can help us analyze and use the information effectively in the foresight process. So imagine it as a kind of organization chart. At the top level, we have the foresight question we're posing. Why do we want to look into the future? What do we want to find out about how the future might impact our organization, our enterprise? Beneath the foresight question, to support answering the question, we have a range of megatrends. Underneath megatrends, we have clusters of drivers. And then underneath each driver, we have a cluster of trends and horizon scanning insights. And we're going to look into each of those definitions and the terminology right now. So what is a megatrend? A megatrend is a collection of trends, drivers, possible future developments that combine to have a significant bearing on the future being studied. What are drivers? Driver is something that causes significant change in the system under study. Drivers typically represent clusters of trends or findings from horizon scanning. So what is a trend? A trend is a pattern of activity where the underlying data shows a clear development path over time. Typically, we can apply mathematical models to extrapolate the data into the future to create predictions or forecasts. The data we use in a trend represents clear evidence of the existing trend's development path, and it shows our foresight is grounded in reality. What about horizon scanning? Horizon scanning is a term used to describe the collection of possible future developments. That includes innovations, ideas, possibilities, thoughts about the future in which other future factors might combine to create previously unthought of possibilities. It includes weak signals, emerging indicators of possible future change for which there might be limited but an increasing number of data points. And finally, wildcards, high impact, low probability events that could have a significant bearing on the future. So what about driving forces? A driving force is a driver, a trend, or a finding from horizon scanning that has been composed to describe opposite potential outcomes. These opposite potential outcomes are important when we come to construct a scenario. They're usually positive versus negative, growing versus declining, fast versus slow, or accelerating versus slowing. The driving forces come together to help us create a scenario grid. So let's take two driving forces, for example. Let's say we want to explore the intersection of the economy and the way that the pandemic is being managed. So we have our first driving force, the pandemic and its management, and the opposing outcomes might be poorly contained pandemic and eradication of the pandemic. When we look at the economy, our opposing outcomes might be a deep and prolonged downturn or a vibrant economic rebound. Now, let's park that for a second and look at what we mean by scenarios and scenario planning. Scenarios combine future factors, so driving forces, trends, horizon scan insights, into a range of storylines about the future and how the future might play out in the context of the foresight question we've posed. Scenarios should be plausible and relevant. They should respond to that question. They should be believable. But they should be challenging and compelling, forcing the organization to ask questions. And they should be internally consistent. So let's look at the four scenarios using those two driving forces. Arguably, the most favorable scenario is inclusive abundance, where we see eradication of the pandemic and a vibrant economic rebound. Our second scenario we might call safe but hungry, where we see eradication of the pandemic but a deep and prolonged economic downturn. The most dystopian view of the future in this horizon exercise might be where we see a deep and prolonged downturn and a poorly contained pandemic. We might call that the long goodbye. And finally, where we see a vibrant economic rebound but a poorly contained pandemic, we might call that the VIP economy. So you see how using those opposing outcomes gives us extreme opposites for the scenarios that we developed. Plausibility is important, but challenge is also very important. If you want to know more about this program, Foresight for a Reinvented Future, then contact me via the link in the description below.